Well, here we are again. Welcome to another edition of Pray on This. I'm John Prey, your host, and today, well, the headline is Doomsday. The end is here. You know, it's a pretty eye-catching headline. Grabs you, makes you want to read the article or listen to the story. But why? Well, the reason is that it triggers that fight-flight response in our brains. And if you read it, you're going to be afraid. And that's going to sell commercials, airtime, and newspapers. Yes, those things still exist, newspapers. And it doesn't really matter what the headline is. I'm 53 years old, and I remember killer bees. I remember being told an ice age was coming. We were not going to have food. Then, of course, there was the COVID-19 pandemic, and now that's subsiding. Murder hornets didn't catch on, neither did monkeypox, but there's always good old-fashioned climate change. That's always good for 1,000 words or 5 minutes on the 6 o'clock news. Well, why am I bringing this up? Well, I'm bringing this up because this is what mainstream media and governments use against you, particularly liberal left-wing governments. In my time on this planet, I have heard many things that are going to kill us. One of the first biggest doomsday prophets was Paul R. Ehrlich. You know, he's a 90-year-old professor of biology. He specializes in insects, butterflies to be exact. But in 1968, the year before I was born, he wrote a book called The Population Bomb. And in this book, he predicted that humans would face mass starvation by the end of the 1970s, brought on by over-farming, which would cause famine because of overpopulation. In the book, he also predicted that all the life in the oceans would be dead by the end of the 1980s, and the UK would not exist by 2000 due to climate change. He advocated for keeping a low birth rate, but not just a low birth rate, also a higher death rate. He advocated for keeping the birth rate and the death rates equal. But in the first place, he wanted to manage birth rate to the point of making sure that population decreased. In 2004, in a major interview on the American television show 60 Minutes, he was confronted about how not one of his predictions had ever come true. His response was, well, in predicting the future, it's not that I got things wrong, it's just that I got the timing wrong. You know, I find it amazing. I looked the man up, and according to Forbes Brothers, he's worth $1.5 million. That's it's a pretty good bank balance for a man who's over 90 years old and was a university professor at what would not be one of the top tier schools in the United States. But even in his 90s, he is still sought out by mainstream media like NBC, CNN, CBC for his policies and his predictions of doomsday coming. We have to wonder why that is. Another one is Al Gore, the 45th Vice President of the United States, failed politician, and one of the biggest doomsday prophets that we currently have on the planet. If we really take a look at Al, here is a man that in 2000, after losing the presidential race to George W. Bush, was deeply in debt. And yet, by 2007, about a year and a half after the release of his docudrama, The Inconvenient Truth, the man was worth over $100 million. Today, he's worth close to $500 million, owns 7 homes, has a carbon footprint larger than a city of 100,000 people, but is still considered one of the foremost authorities on global warming. Al's not a scientist. He's not a climatologist. He's a failed politician. He created his own television company in the early 2000s called Current TV, and he sold it in 2011 to Al Jazeera for $100 million. It's a state-funded company from Qatar that gets 90% of its wealth from oil and gas. I guess $100 million can pay for those principles that Al claims that he has, pay for you to not adhere to them. Recently, he was confronted by John Stossel. John Stossel wanted him to come on and have a debate with climate scientists who don't share his opinion. But when asked to participate in this debate, he declined. When asked why, he said, "The climate is settled. There is no argument." Well, that's the most unscientific thing I've ever heard of. Science is always changing. It's always evolving. And we should always be asking questions. The only thing that's ever settled is political policy that you personally hold and that you want to put forward. Again, the man is worth $380 million in climbing, and his only real source of income is talking about climate change. Then we come to that little Swedish girl, St. Greta Thunberg of climate change. The autistic girl who had her "How dare you" speech at the UN. She was the perfect spokesman. She was 16 years old. She was scared. She's autistic. But that's not the best reason to be a spokesman. What does she know about climate? What does she know about climate change? What does she know about the science? Probably nothing. At that point in time, she would have been, at best, in grade 11 in high school in Canada. So, what does a 16-year-old know? No, that's not why she was the perfect spokesperson for climate change. She was the perfect spokesperson because she was a young, attractive girl who also had a learning disability. So to criticize her, well, that was just unthinkable. Any critic that St. Greta had, well, you're just being a mean, nasty man. Today, she's not that young girl anymore. She's 20 years old. I don't know. I did try to find out, but did she ever finish high school? That is unknown. What I do know is that at 20, she isn't old enough to have gone to college, university, to earn a degree. She's definitely not a climate scientist. She's a spokesperson for her movement, the first world environmentalist. And she happens to be worth 1 million euros. Now, when you sit there and go, oh yeah, but her parents, one's an actor and the other's an opera singer. Well, actors in Europe and opera singers, they get paid decently, but they're not like Brad Pitt in Hollywood making millions and millions of dollars per film. They're just comfortable middle-class people. So how did Greta, a 20-year-old who for 2 years of her life wasn't even able to make money because of the pandemic, how did she amass a personal fortune of $1 million? I think if you're paying attention, you can kind of see where I'm going with this. I'm following the teachings of Dan Petta on this. Now again, Dan, he's not a climatologist either. He's a businessman and a billionaire. And when I say things like that, there's those of you out there immediately go, well, he's a billionaire. What does he care about the environment? I don't know if he does or if he doesn't. I do know that he doesn't know about the environment, and I do know that he doesn't claim to know about it. But he does say that climate change is a hoax. And his reasons are probably the best reasons of all. It's called follow the money. If the climate hysterics Greta, Al, and Paul, if they're correct, why would a bank invest in a condo in Miami Beach? Why would they build an office tower in London? Why would they be doing anything in Dubai? Makes no sense. All of that's going to be underwater. And when that goes underwater, you've lost your investment. So why don't we follow the money as to where Paul got his money from? Oh, he got it from media outlets who needed it to enforce a story that makes you scared, so you'll buy their publications or you'll watch their television shows. Where did Al get all of his money? Well, I think it's pretty clear he got an awful lot of money from Al Jazeera, which is a state-owned media company in the state of Qatar, which is a oil-producing nation. As a matter of fact, 90% of its GDP comes from oil. Where is St. Greta getting her money? Well, that we don't know. That's pretty quiet. But I'm willing to bet if we really do some deep digging in there, we're going to find out that it also comes from oil-rich nations. Why are they doing this? They're trying to limit supply, but the biggest reason is they don't want the developing world to have the same technology that we do. They do not want to share those resources. They want to be able to exploit those resources in the developing countries, but they don't want to pay for them. And it's the biggest joke of all, because there is not a single person in Canada, the United States, the entire European Union, or Japan, or Australia for that matter, that are going to do a damn thing about climate change. And the reason is that it's not up to us to decide. It's going to be the poor of the world who decide it. And we're not going to have any sway over them because they're poor. And they don't want to be poor. And they can take a look and see how we climbed from being nothing but poor dirt farmers in 1895 to living the lives that we live today. It's the oil and gas industry. And it is not going to change for them because they don't want to see their children die. They don't want to have to eke out a living without electricity, without gasoline to power cars, diesel fuel to power equipment. They don't want to live in incredibly hot temperatures without air conditioning. They don't want to live in cold temperatures without central heating. They don't want to see their children die because there's not enough food. So just remember this. When the prophets of doom start spreading their prophecies, why are they doing it? What's their motivation? Why are they trying to scare you? Well, they fly around the world on their private jets. Why are they trying to tell you how to live your life when they don't live the life that you live? It all comes down to those who have all the money and all the power don't want to share it with those who don't. Remember this the next time that you go to the gas station and you have to pay Justin Trudeau's ever-growing carbon tax. Remember this the next time when you go to buy a new car and all you can buy is an electric car because Stephen Guilbeault says that's what you have to do. Remember this the next time when you go to the grocery store that Krista Freeland told you that, hey, if you cut out Disney Plus, that'll help with inflation. It won't. This is all about control and having us poor, non-connected, non-elite people lead the lives that they want us to lead. And that is prey on this.